The Big Book Group's a show for book lovers and everyone who loves to read, whether you're in a book group or not. Our aim is to share our love of reading with the audience, and it's really a show that readers do run. So I came up with the name, the Big Book Group, and I knew that everybody in my street practically is in a book group. My wife's in one, my neighbour's in one, the blokes over the road have got one, and I thought, maybe we could have a show here. If I get great authors and we have a quiz and we do lots of features, we could have a lot of fun.
So, stand up, book lovers of Brighton. Let's have a bit of house light, please. It's time to find out who is our longest serving book group in the show tonight. If you've been in a book group for 6 months or less, please sit down. You're welcome. We look forward to hearing about your book group. If you've been in a book group for a year or less, please sit down. Excellent, welcome. And a gentleman in a book group, we love seeing that. 16 years or less, 17 years or less, 18 years of book group.
So tonight's show we've got Sarah Rayner, who's a best-selling author of a book called One Moment, One Morning, which begins on the London to Brighton train. Something shocking happens and a story unfolds. And she's here to launch her new book, The 2-Week Wait, which is about infertility.
Later in the show, we're going to do Brighton and Hove in fiction, and we're going to be talking about place. I wanted to ask you about some of the favourite books you've read that really evoke a sense of place.
Right. I remember I got so convinced by the whole C.S. Lewis Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe thing.
Anyone else? Yeah.
That I thought that if I crawled under the bench on Richmond Green, which is where I grew up, that I would end up in Narnia. And I got scared halfway under the bench and thought, actually, I don't know if I want to end up in Narnia. I quite like being in Richmond.
So we try and do things a bit differently with the show. We get our authors to actually share their love of reading as well as talking about their work. So I always ask them what their top 5 books are, and we get a lot of murmuring from the audience when they recognise titles. We get the authors also, they give us a reading, I interview them a little bit, but mainly I get the audience to do the interview, and that's what this show's all about. They ask the questions.
Who did you let read your book first, and how did you go about choosing who you would get the good feedback from, and was it difficult?
Somebody advised me, actually, to give it to somebody who you know will be really nice about it, but also to give it to someone who you know will be a bit more blunt. So certainly with One Moment, I gave it to my sister-in-law because I knew she wouldn't pull her punches. She's in my book group, she's vicious.
The authors have a question for the audience always as well, which is quite a lot of fun. And lastly, we get them to do us a bit of what we call flash fiction, which they sometimes have to have their arms twisted to do it, but at every location we get the audience to shout out a place in the town or city, some action like a duel or some other type of thing, a couple of characters, maybe a famous son or daughter of the town, and then our writers have to quickly write a short story which they perform at the end.
So we need you to give us a place in Brighton or Hove where this terrible occurrence or joyous occurrence can happen. Toys R Us.
Toys R Us.
Sarah, what think you?
I think Toys R Us is...
Toys R Us, you're in. Excellent. Toys R Us. Such a Brighton location.
But the great thing about book groups is that they are their own little closed world, and some of them have really different ways of recruiting people. Some book groups make you have a 1,000-word written application, and it's that rigorous. Others, it's just friends who ask one another. But the fun we find out when we do the show is that once you're in a book group, it's almost impossible to leave it.
You guys are our winners with 13 out of 20. I don't believe it. Now listen, you've been a wonderful audience. We're about to go to the interval, but in the words of Flaubert, the only way of tolerating existence is to lose oneself in a perpetual orgy of literature. So I invite you to have a glass of wine.